back, it's Lisa here and it's time to paint once again. This week I'm going to paint beautiful Frangipani flowers. We have quite a few varieties here in sunny Queensland, but I'm going to do the yellow and white flowers, which are quite predominant in my area on the Gold Coast where I live. They're stunning flowers. They have a beautiful bouquet and a beautiful strong yellow that comes out from the centre. Now, I have a palette here that I've made out of different types, brands of paint with different colours, but I'm going to use my cadmium yellow. It's very handy to make up a chart like the one I'm showing you now, especially if you're using tubed paints and you have different brands, because you've heard me talk about this before, but different brands have quite different pigments, colours for the same name of colour. Now remember, the first thing I want to do is add clean water to my paper in the areas that I want the colour to sit in without a hard edge. Remember the rule that if you want delicate soft edges, it's always best to wet the page first. I'm quickly adding my yellow in, letting it run, and then as the wet yellow paint hits my wet paper, so it's wet on wet, I'm adding in a dab of my deeper colour at the very centre of my flower. So I will repeat this by wetting each petal as I go, and you won't notice it yet, but when I finish doing each petal, you'll realise that I've left one side of each petal which rolls over on itself. I've left it white, so I haven't wet one particular part of each petal. If you're like me and you're a naturally light painter, feel free to go in and darken those deeper areas as the paint is still wet before it totally dries, because remember, the aim is not to have hard edges. So if you work while the paint is wet on the wet paper, chances are it's just going to flow out softly and gradually when you add stronger pigment, and you won't get a hard edge. At some point it will start to dry enough that little areas of hard edges will start to appear, and this is when you really have to have your eyes peeled to watch for that and eliminate them as they happen. By adding a dark spot here, I'm making the centre go away from us. Remember, lighter colours come forward and darker colours go away. Now we have white petals, so we need to wet the rest of the petal and add a little bit of watered down ultramarine blue, because French ultramarine blue is a great way of showing white in shade. So by adding a tiny bit of moisture to each petal and then a tiny little bit of watery French ultramarine blue, it will actually give us the feeling that that petal is slightly shaded. So it's not getting the sunlight directly, or even more so that it's in shadow. So French ultramarine blue is my go-to. If you don't like that, and some people don't, it's too blue, I would suggest adding a darker brown or even a tiny bit of burnt sienna to your French ultramarine, and that will tone it down a little bit. It'll grey it down a little bit, because burnt sienna is orange typically, it's an orangey brown. Orange and blue are opposite on the colour wheel, and remember, opposites on the colour wheel kill each other, they dull each other down. So if the blue is too ultramarine blue, what do? You dull it down by adding what's opposite on the colour wheel. And you can do that very subtly, even by adding a brown instead of a burnt sienna. So now what I'm doing here with my burnt sienna is I've added a depth. So I've indicated now a shadow with the burnt sienna of that rolled edge I was talking about earlier. Because it's rolling up off the petal, it's causing a little shadow when it's laying horizontally. So if I indicate that for each one as I go around each of the petals, sometimes it'll be more severe, sometimes it'll be less severe, depending on the angle the sun is hitting the flower. But you're visually working with that concept that darker tones, darker colours push away from us. They give us depth. Lighter colours come forward. Here I am with a little bit more ultramarine blue because this flower off to the side is facing away from us. And I think it's really important when you're a beginner, the easiest thing to do, because your brain has to be okay with understanding what you're painting, the easiest thing to do is to paint flowers front on, at elevation, so we see them almost flat to us. And that's a really good place to start. It helps you draw proportion and size and shape and all the important things that help you identify a specific flower. But what you need to remember is, as you progress with confidence and ability in watercolor, you need to start drawing things that aren't facing you directly. And especially with flowers, a wonderful thing to do for a composition with a floral presentation is one or two front on, slightly tilted or angled, and then you do need to get some supporting flowers, or at least one that's angled away from you. I'm just doing a little bud that hasn't even opened up yet. So think of things like this when you're gathering reference, you're taking photos, perhaps you're looking for things to inspire you to do a painting of. And remember that even though it's not so exciting to add a little bud in there, or a flower that might be a little bit withered or tilting away from you, as a compositional element, it's really, really powerful, because it adds depth to your composition by adding something that the brain goes, oh, that's not straight at me, it's turned and it's away and it seems further back than the main hero flower. That's a really, really great way to become a better artist. And there's nothing about failing with that. You will find that the more you try to do it, the better you'll get at understanding the benefits of it and where it should be. I'm putting up a few series of online lessons. I need to finish some things off with my timing. It's not been too efficient of late. But what I'm looking at is exactly what I've just been explaining. I want to get some different presentations, different, like one will be a floral, different concepts. One's a beach scene, one's a little street scene, and I'm actually breaking it down to show you how you can understand the composition, the impact that things make, how to improve your composition, how to work with light, shade and shadow and colour. So that's coming. I'm very excited about that. That's coming next year, which is nearly upon us. Now, with this green, I've just used my Sennelier dark green. You could use any green as long as you balance it to keep it in a warmer tone of green. What do I mean by that? Look at this colour as I lay it out. It's a little bit neutral, which I'm happy about, but greens can be cool or warm. When you think of a bluey green ocean, you think of a cooler green. That's a phthalo green. Remember the pterodactyl and the silent P in the snow. So the warmer greens, I'm adding burnt sienna into this green because burnt sienna is a warm, earthy colour. And by adding something like an orange or a red or a burnt sienna, think of flames and fire, adding a warm brown or orange to this more neutral green is going to heat it up. You think of colours like olive green, khaki green, really browny greens, and they're warm because you think of an olive tree and climates that olive trees grow in. Think of khaki and a desert cactus and things like that. So greens are a great colour because they can be so variable within what they're being used for. But with this one, I really want the yellow to pop. So I don't want it too orangey because remember, yellow and orange are very close on the colour wheel. So the more orange I put into my leaves, the more it's going to blend in with the flower and the yellow. I want the green to have a depth, to be darker and a little bit neutral. So that's just sort of a green that's not a pretty bluey green, but it's not really a real orange green as well. So try to work with what greens you have. And what I like to teach my students is to understand colour relating to the colour wheel, because when you understand colour that way, you don't need to buy 15 greens and remember the names of them. You might realise, oh, a sap green, that's typically a warm green, or a forest green is a cool green. It doesn't matter, the name doesn't matter. As soon as you make a little colour swatch of that green, you will be able to look at the colour wheel and identify it, whether it's a neutral green, a warm green, or a cool green, and then you'll know what to add to it to make it the type of green that you want. So here I've switched it around. I've put more of a burnt sienna brown, but then I've added in a little bit of the green to actually make it a bit darker and less orange. I mainly use my colour wheel to do subtle variations to influence the colours that I have, to change them up. And that to me is important to learn as a beginner, because what I don't want you all to be doing is going out and buying 50 different tubes of paint and have 16 greens, 5 oranges, 3 reds, 10 blues. It gets all too confusing. And when you're doing a lot of painting, you start to understand how to mix colours, and it becomes easier. Every time you do it, it becomes easier. And that's what I'd love to teach everyone, because then you can paint with just really the basic colours. And if you can paint with, say, you take up a little set and it's got 6 or 7 colours in it, and then you can travel and you've got this lovely little travel kit with you, and you're more likely to paint more if you haven't got to get a drawer out and you've got 28 tubes of paint and you can't really remember which one was which and all that sort of thing. For me, painting is the happiest place, and for me, so is sitting on a surfboard, because I'm a terrible surfer, but I love sitting out there on the back trying to surf. And I love skating, I love roller skating, but I always have that little bit of a fear that, what if I fall over? But my happy place, when I'm in my happy place, I want to minimize stress. I want to uncomplicate things as much as I possibly can. And that's my passion for teaching you and putting these free lessons up, is that I know proven ways to minimize the stress in learning how to paint, and understanding the true ability of mixing colours and understanding colours is key to being happy at painting. Well, it really was for me and so many of my students. It's a big, big part of it. Anyway, I'm not on drugs. I've just had a lot to say in a short amount of time. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and here is the finished product. Now, remember, when you have a painting and you've got something white in your subject and it's on white paper, it's like a nice little thing to just potter around, neatly wet areas of the background and add in a little bit of colour. I could have chosen to go with blue. In fact, I almost did, a sky blue, so that would be a phthalo blue for me, or a cerulean blue, not ultramarine. I'm going to use my Derwent set, and I'm just going to choose 2 greens that are in there. One is this deep green, which I find quite neutral, and one is the light lemony lime green, which I just find very refreshing. And so each little section, I'm not under the stress of having to wet all of the surroundings of my subject. I'm just going to wet a little triangle of paper that butts up to each area at a time. So that reduces my stress, because I'm only dealing with this little triangle of wet paper at a time. And it doesn't really matter to me if I form a hard edge there or not. The fact is, I'm just in control of this little area, and I'm deciding that I want to show the petals, so it's important that I get some green down around it. And I have a lot of control with this wet on wet situation. And I will leave it there. I hope you enjoy this one. I hope you get to try it, and have a lovely Christmas. I've got a little Christmas message for everyone that I recorded, And thank you all to my subscribers, those faithful to me since the very start, and new ones and the ones along the way. I really appreciate it. And please let me know comments on what you're thinking. Help me improve. And just remember to ask as many questions as you like, and I will respond. Thank you, everybody. All the best. Bye-bye. See you next time.